So I'd like to welcome Professor Ghil'ad Zuckermann to the stage. Professor Ghil'ad Zuckermann, DPhil, Oxford, PhD Cambridge, titular, MA Tel Aviv, summa cum laude, I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, is Chair of the Linguistics and Endangered Languages at the University of Adelaide. Professor Zuckermann is the author of the Revivalistics, From the Genesis of Israeli to the Language Reclamation of Australia and Beyond, Oxford University Press 2020, and a number of other books which you can reference Ghil'ad's bio in the program of the book. Professor Zuckermann is the founder of Revivalistics, a new global transdisciplinary field of inquiry surrounding language reclamation, revitalisation and reinvigoration. On the 14th of September 2011, he launched with the Wangkawa Aboriginal communities of the Eyre Peninsula, South Australia, the reclamation of the Bangala language. Professor Zuckermann is an elected member of the Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies, IATSIS, and the Foundation for Endangered Language, FEL. He was president of the Australian Association for Jewish Studies in 2017 to 2023, president of the Australex in 2013 to 2015, chief investigator in an NHMRC research project assessing language revival and mental health in 2017 and 2021. Australia Research Council, ARC, Discovery Fellow in 2007 to 2011, and the Gulbenkian, now I'm probably saying this a little bit blackfellow there, the Gulbenkian? Gulbenkian, sorry, there you go.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, Research Fellow at the Churchill College, Cambridge in 2000 to 2004. He's been a consultant and an expert witness in corpus lexicography and forensic linguistics in court cases all over the globe. He has taught at Middlebury College, Vermont, University of Cambridge, University of Queensland, National University of Singapore, Shanghai Jiao Tong University, East China Normal University, Shanghai International Studies University, Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Ben Gurion University of the Negev and University of Miami. Now look, you can slap me on the wrist if I'm slaughtering these words. He has been a research fellow at the Wiseman Institute of Science, Tel Aviv University, Rockefeller's Foundation Study and Conference Centre, Villa Serbelloni, Bellagio, Italy, Harry Ransom Humanities Research Centre, University of Texas in Austin, Israel Institute for Advanced Studies, Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Institute for Advanced Study, La Trobe University, Mahidol University, and the National Institute for Japanese Language and Linguistics, Tokyo. He has been a Denise Skinner Scholar at St Hugh's College, Oxford, Scatcherd European Scholar at the University of Oxford, and a Scholar of the United World College of Adriatic, Italy. His MOOC, Massive Open Online Course, Language Revival, Securing the Future of Endangered Languages, has attracted 20,000 learners from over 190 countries. So, incredible journey that you have been on, Ghil'ad. So please, we welcome you to the stage to present.
When I arrived in Oxford in 1996, somebody came to me and said, Philip Jones, his name was Philip Jones, PhD, FBA, CBE. And I asked him, is this how you spell your name? He just gave me all his... It's a great pleasure to be here in Kalgoorlie for the second time. I would like to thank Sue Hansen for the invitation. It's such a pleasure to be surrounded by so many lovely people in such dire straits in the world. I call this presentation Language Revival and Aboriginal Wellbeing. It has to do with revivalistics, and you can see here some revivalist sticks. And if you don't reclaim your sleeping beauty or dreaming beauty, your language and your culture and your cultural autonomy and your intellectual sovereignty will become just driftwood, just like the photo that I took in Bangala land. So this is kind of an evoking metaphor. I recommend this book to you. It is an academic book, but it has a lot of accessible parts as well. I would like to start with some photos, and I think we touched upon it in one of the panels, but most languages in the world are oral, meaning they do not have traditional scripts, so more than 3,500 languages. English, Hebrew, Chinese are actually a minority. But when we reclaim, meaning revive a sleeping beauty, no longer spoken language, or revitalize, meaning revive a language that has some elders speaking the language, like Adnyamatna, or reinvigorate, meaning reviving languages that have many speakers, but still it's endangered, like Te Reo Maori. When we do all these things, which are under the umbrella of revival, reclamation, revitalization, and reinvigoration, we need resources. And the resources are either technological, or written. So it's a little bit ironic, because these languages are traditionally oral tout court. They're only oral, but we need the resources. And I'm very happy to see so many beautiful resources as we've just launched the Ngaju. We also need resilience, and resilience is not like Rambo knocking you out and you just fall. It's more like Muhammad Ali, whom I had the pleasure of meeting in 1993 in Detroit. If you know anything about boxing, he was there for the long run. He would fight you until you collapse out of exhaustion. This is what we need for language revival. Look, I use the metaphor Sleeping Beauty, but it's not like kissing the Sleeping Beauty and then suddenly it's kind of alive and kicking. It's much more complex than that. So metaphors have some limitations. Of course, language revival has to do with well-being, with mental health, and we will touch upon it. And of course, language revival has to do with missionaries. And I was happy to see Jackie Coffin and others talking about missionary linguistics. That's Klamor Wilhelm Schumann. He was born in Osnabrück, which is in Germany, more specifically in Bissendorf, which is a village near Osnabrück. I have actually visited his place, and it's now a mental hospital, ironically. And Klamor Wilhelm Schumann, who came in 1838 to Adelaide, wanted to Christianize the heathens, in quotation marks, heathens, of course. Some Chinese student asked me at the end of the course, what does this mean? So I said, oh, wow, I mean, they actually did not know that this means quotation marks. So, I mean, like, they understood me literally throughout my course. So this means, like, ironically. Now, what is interesting here is that we use a dictionary written for Christianization for aboriginalization. And why is it so beautiful? Because, of course, the dictionary written in 1844, in the case of the Bangala Aboriginal language of Eyre Peninsula, included many spiritual items from the Bangala language. I mean, Aboriginal spiritual items. And he did it to Christianize, but we can do it to go back to the Aboriginal spirituality. I find it fascinating, and righting the wrong of the past in a symmetric way. Another fascinating thing is the use of technology. Technology killed Aboriginal languages. Technology means ships who brought the Anglo-Celtic colonizers to Australia. Technology means weapons. Technology means the black car that it was an Aboriginal, it was a governmental official, but the black car that brought the governmental official to take Harry Dare, who is here, when he was 4 from his mother to a missionary. So technology killed these languages. Of course, he was not allowed to speak his mother's language. We use technology, and you can all download for free the Bangla app. We use technology in order to reconnect. So technology is a killer, technology is a healer. So that's Howard Richards. You can see him here. He was he was stolen when he was kind of 13. He reconnected with his Aboriginal language with your humble servant, but actually he also reconnected with his Norwegian heritage because his father was Norwegian. So you can see how beautiful it is. When you reconnect with one heritage, you end up reconnecting with other heritages as well. I like it, you know. This is in 2018. You can see that we have more and more people participating. The main question I would like to ask today, and this is a question that we did not answer on the panel yesterday, is why on earth should we invest time and money in reviving, in quotation marks, dead languages? Sleeping beauties, dreaming beauties, you can choose your term for these languages that are no longer spoken. I'm going to give you today 3 distinct, different reasons, and I want to explain why I'm giving you the 3 reasons, other than this is what I believe. There is also a pragmatic reason for me giving you the 3 reasons. The first reason is why I do what I do, dedicate my life to the revival of Aboriginal languages in Australia and beyond. It's the ethical reason, to do what is the right thing to do. This is, in philosophy, we say deontological reason. These languages deserve to be revived regardless of any benefit. This is an ethical, moral reason. That's why I do what I do. But this is not what you need to use when you talk to public servants. When you talk to public servants, you need to use another reason rather than the ethical reason. And that reason is the 3rd reason that I'm mentioning here. And this is called in philosophy the utilitarian reason. In lay terms, it is what is useful, beneficial for society. You understand the difference between what is deontological and what is utilitarian. I'll give you an example. If somebody murdered another person, this person deserves to be jailed. This is deontological. But you might say, look, the person who murdered actually has 100 kids. He needs to feed the kids. The person who was murdered is an orphan. Nobody cares about him. Everybody hates him. So for society, it would have been better not to jail the murderer because he needs to feed the 100 kids. So this is a utilitarian point of view. It's a difference point of view. Coming back to language revival, the utilitarian reason is saying to a public servant, you give me $1 million, I'm going to save you $5 million. How? And then you need to quantify. That's what public servants as a generalization. Of course, I'm generalizing. I'm a linguist. A linguist must generalize. If there is a linguist who tells you that he does not generalize, you know that he is a spy. Because a language is an abstract ensemble of idiolects, sociolects, dialects, and lects. There is no such thing as language. Your language is different from your language. So we are generalizing. A public servant generalizingly is somebody who bean counts, who checks numbers, number checker. Therefore, you need to explain. I revive this language, you give me the support, I'm going to save you money in opportunity costs, incarceration, mental health issues, etc., etc. I'm reviving this language, you will need to pay less for diabetic treatment. and you need to explain how. This is the utilitarian reasons. And of course, in the middle, and we are humans, there is the aesthetic reason. What is beautiful? The world is more beautiful with more languages, and I will explain this when I get there. There are many related questions to the main question today. So the main question is this, but there are many related questions. For example, should we financially compensate indigenous people for the loss of their native tongue? I'll answer very briefly. Absolutely yes. And the reason is simple. Language is not less important than land. In my own humble opinion, I don't represent anybody here except myself, language is far more important than land. Far more important. I will tell you a personal story. I was born to a Holocaust survivor, so my father was a Holocaust survivor, and my first memory is the Yom Kippur War. Yom Kippur War is when Israel was surprised by the Arab nations. And when I lived in the 70s, my childhood memories were in Sinai Desert. Sinai Desert was part of Israel. This is where I grew up. Now Sinai Desert belongs to another country called Egypt. So when I make a trip down memory lane, I need a passport, a visa, and a certificate that there are no terrorists in Sinai Desert. If you ask me, are you devastated by not being able to go to your childhood place? My answer would be, I would have been much more devastated if you told me that I was not allowed to speak Israeli or revived Hebrew. So if you ban me speaking my own mother tongue, it's much more severe than if you ban me from going to Sinai Desert. In fact, I haven't been to Sinai Desert for maybe 25 years, and I feel okay. Whereas if you told me you're not allowed to speak Israeli, I would be extremely depressed. So I personally believe that language is much more important than land. Then if you get money directly or indirectly for the loss of land, why should you not get money for the loss of lang? I just don't understand it. Just because you cannot touch it? Is it just because of tangibility? We are human beings in the 21st century. The intangible is now understood as very important. We are not like... Should indigenous languages be defined as official languages of Australia? Absolutely. And I'm very happy that Ada mentioned beautifully before my lecture that conclusion. Should we erect multilingual signs, changing the landscape, the linguistic landscape? Absolutely yes. Does language dictate the way we think? No, I think that it does not dictate, but it influences the way we think. And one of the best examples for that is a research conducted about bridges. In German, the word for bridge is feminine, die Brücke. In Italian, the word for bridge is masculine, il ponte. If you ask Italians to describe a bridge, they would subconsciously describe it as sturdy, strong. If you ask Germans to describe a bridge, they would subconsciously describe it as elegant, beautiful. This derives from the gender of the word bridge in their respective languages. This is an influence which is subconscious. This is but one example. It is based on an experiment by Lera Boroditsky. Is it possible at all to reclaim a sleeping or a dreaming beauty? Well, the answer here would be yes, but you are going to have cross-fertilization with the revivalists' mother tongues. My mother tongue, modern Hebrew, revived Hebrew, Israeli, whatever you want to call it, is not identical to Hebrew. It's actually very different from Hebrew. I have no problem whatsoever with that. But I want you to know, when you reclaim a language, you will never end up with the original language. Don't be puristic. Don't be prescriptivist. Don't tell your kids, give us authenticity or give us death, because you will get the death. Here are some photos of the landscape. Before this sign, nobody, seriously, in Port Lincoln knew that the word for Port Lincoln was Galinyala. Now everybody almost knows that because of this sign. This is a sign we caused the government to put, the local government. Look how beautiful Mangere Yarda. I've brought some, I've brought some Mangere Yarda. I think it is somewhere here. Yeah, that one. Mangere means in Bangala, well, or healthy. You can see that Navigator College managed to put a new building called Mangere. It's a gym, so this is where you get healthy, you get, this is a game changer in Port Lincoln, because now almost everybody in Port Lincoln sees this beautiful college. We have many signs that the council put. This is Clamor Wilhelm Schumann. You can see on the right, Lavinia Richards. She was stolen. She's a stolen generations member. Many Bangala were stolen. As you know, because of the mixing, then you had a higher level of mixed Aboriginal people. So that they were the ones who were stolen. Very interestingly, many Bangala married Gabrin people from around this area, Gabrin, so we have a Gabrin connection as well. Shania Richards, she's from Western Australia, she's Bangala, but from Western Australia as well. You can listen to her beautiful interview on BBC where she said that she was suicidal, and then she discovered our reclamation workshops, and it took her away from her suicidal thoughts. A similar story to my friend Jeff Anderson from a Wiradjuri man from Parkes. Again, 4 attempts of suicide, and then discovering the Wiradjuri language and becoming one of the leading teachers of Wiradjuri in Parkes, not far from Dubbo in New South Wales. Jeff Anderson, if you do not know him, I urge you to listen to him on ABC rather than BBC. Shania is on BBC. I want to say that language revival is much beyond Australia, and my hope for Aboriginal Australians is that you would become the world leaders in revivalistics, and in 50, 100 years, you or your aunts or your descendants would be the ones who go to Namibia or to South Africa or to Thailand or to New Caledonia or to Tibet or to Mongolia or to Canada, and you would teach other minorities / indigenous / whatever you want to call languages revival. I think that Australia, given its almost unparalleled linguicide rate in the world, so as you know, 400 languages, only 12 are alive and kicking. Alive and kicking means spoken by 100% of kids within the tribe, so I'm talking about 3%. Only 3% of Australian languages are spoken by 100% of kids. This includes Pidginjara, for example. Somebody mentioned Pidginjara yesterday. 3%. This is 97% of linguicide, language killing. So Australia is a leader in quotation marks, kind of a leader in the negative sense of killing languages. Australia ought to become the #1 leader in revivalistics. That's maybe another implementation that we can put as a vision to the government. I'm a native speaker of reclaimed Hebrew, and I want to tell you that in reality, the fin de siècle Hebrew revivalists were a small, unsupported group. Fin de siècle means the end of the 19th century. And as Margaret Mead might have said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. I want you to remember this sentence if you feel that what you're doing is within a very small team, whereas many people around you could not give a damn. Remember that sentence. It's a very small group of people who makes a change. Look at the left, Eliezer Ben Yehuda, the main Hebrew revivalist, a monomaniac. I would have loved to be his psychiatrist, to kind of get into his head. He was obsessive. I'm sure you know many linguists who are obsessed, about a morpheme or a phoneme. You need to have some kind of mental traits to be a linguist, especially typologist, Look at Eliezer Ben Yehuda on the right. This is his grandson. His name is also Eliezer Ben Yehuda. It's very rare to have the same name. A lovely guy. I argue that Israeli is a hybrid language. It's a cross-fertilized syncretic language, a little bit like religion sometimes becomes a syncretic religion. I mentioned Te Reo Maori. Most Maori are Christian, but when I asked my friend Patu Hohepa, why did you all become Christian? He said, 57 gods, one more. So then I realized it was a syncretic religion. It's not really monotheistic religion in New Zealand. The same in language. Israeli is a syncretic, it's a hybrid language. It is based on the one hand on Hebrew, that's a Phoenix. On the other hand, it is based on Yiddish, which is a Jewish language, not Hebrew. That's the cuckoo laying its eggs in the nest of another bird, triggering it to believe that it is its own bird. Cuckoos are a little bit cuckoo. Yeah? And on the other hand, Israeli is a magpie stealing from American, from Arabic. In fact, almost all curse or swear words in Israeli are Arabic. By the way, almost all swear words in Ukrainian are Russian. It's really amazing. Do you know Louise Herkes? Louise Herkes is here. She is a wonderful woman. Unfortunately, she's late. She's dead now. But what she did when everybody rushed to the north to speak to real, in quotation marks, Aboriginal people, she actually went to the coasts and recorded many languages that were part of mixing. So with this regard, she was a pioneer, because most linguists wanted to go to Arnhem Land, whereas she went to the languages that were very badly impacted by colonization. And this, by the way, corresponds with the native title problem. I was very happy to hear Peter Yu saying that Aboriginal people ought to put a lot of attention to languages, because if they do not do that, some people might come in 50 years' time and they would say, hey, you're not related to your land anymore, the land that you've received native title for. So actually we are taking your native title away. By the way, this is a very important legal comment that I heard on the first day of this conference. Now, why is it so important? Because as you can imagine, the ones who suffered most colonization are the ones who cannot prove continuity of their land. It's ironic that if your language was killed, it's harder for you to get native title recognition. This is why native tongue title is a must, because you must get compensation for the loss of your language. Otherwise, you will not get compensation for native title. I understand that native title is not compensation. It's indirect compensation when BHP comes and gives you money for, it's not compensation per se. John Adams was a very clever president of the United States. He said, I must study politics and war, that my sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. My sons ought to study mathematics, philosophy, geography, natural history, naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture, in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture again, statuary, tapestry, porcelain. I would add, of course, he said it in 1780, I would add revivalistics, Aboriginal heritage languages, Aboriginal dance, Aboriginal ceremony. I'm sorry to say, But what we are seeing today at universities in Australia is exactly the opposite of what John Adams is saying. Universities in Australia are becoming super TAFEs, meaning they kind of bring people to be nurses, to be skilled. No respect for the third paragraph or for the third statement about the third part of this statement by John Adams. So I am very depressed by the situation at Australian universities today. That's a basic human needs. Abraham Maslow was a Jewish American, and he talked about the hierarchy of needs. Of course, you need to add battery and Wi-Fi these days. But if I ask you, where do most of the people stay? Probably, I'm talking about the world, yeah? I'm not talking about the Middle East. I'm not talking about Ukraine. I'm not talking about all the wars that we have. I'm talking about China. Probably belonging, love. How many people reach self-esteem and self-actualization? Very, very few. Very, very few. How many do you know who have reached their ikigai? Ikigai is the overlap between what you love, what the world needs, what you're paid for, and what you're good at. Maybe Sue Hansen has reached her ikigai. But how many do you know in this world who have reached their ikigai? I have a friend, Al Valodz, he's a guitarist. He loves it, the world needs it, he's good at it. He's not paid for it, no ikigai. I have another friend, Philip Hoban. He's an accountant. The world needs it, he's paid for it, good time. He's good at it, but he doesn't love it. No ikigai. Ikigai, self-actualization, is very, very rare. But, and this is the point, the technological revolution that I'm going to discuss now is going to change this world. I believe that more and more people will go up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and more people will ask, okay, we want more than just things, we want ideas. This is when language revival would become, in the future, much more common and much less niche, because currently this is a niche conference. Most Australians are unaware of this conference, which is a wonderful conference. Now, I mentioned the technological revolution. Let me just explain. The Industrial Revolution of 1760 to 1840 turned people from seeking food to seeking things. As you know, most Aussies were farmers. Most Europeans were farmers. Today, only 4%, max 4% of farmers. It was 90% to 4%. The technological revolution that we are currently experiencing with ChatGPT, AI, CNN, Zoom, Zombification of the world, etc., will turn people from seeking things to seeking ideas. This is when language revival will become much more common than it is now. So we need to prepare for the future. Let me just tell you the four linguistics revolutions, it's important. Speaking more than 70,000 years ago, allowing Homo sapiens sapiens to lie about the past and future, something animals cannot do. This revolution happened before Aboriginal people arrived in Australia. We are all from Africa, as you know. Before Aboriginal people arrived in Australia, there was this revolution. So I believe Aboriginal people arrived in Australia with language. Writing approximately 5,200 years ago, allowing Homo sapiens sapiens to protect himself from thieves. I don't know if you're aware of it, but the writing arose because of thieves. Let me explain. From Iraq, they sold wheat to Israel, and in return they had to get something else, say salt or whatever, and then they received half of the quantity. And they asked what happened, and after investigation and inquiry, they found out that there was a thief on the way from Iraq to Israel. So the next time they wrote 4 units of wheat. That's the beginning of writing. It's amazing because it's economic. Only then came Shakespeare and poetry and love poems, etc. Type printing, Johannes Gutenberg develops the first European movable type printing press. That's a revolution, and now we are in the fourth revolution. So we are part of a revolution. It is a revolution. And 500 years from now, people will talk about this period as a revolution of period. Okay. Ethical reasons. If you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. Nelson Mandela. If you see in the background, it's a Hebrew language. The loss of language is more severe than the loss of land, as I said. Language death means loss of cultural autonomy, loss of intellectual sovereignty, loss of spirituality, loss of well-being, loss of mental health, loss of the soul. Let me give you an example from Adelaide. That's Anthony Forster, and this is the epitome of linguicide, language killing. This is what he says. This is true. This is a fact. The natives would be sooner civilized if their language was extinct. This is what linguicide looks like. Don't believe Aussies who say that, Aboriginal people themselves decided to discard of their language. I've heard this many times. This is an example, and this is 1843, a very important period in the colonization, as you know. Look at South Australian Governor George Grey, who was relatively less anti-Aboriginal. The ruder languages disappear successively, and the tongue of England alone is heard around. Why does he say ruder languages? Why does he regard Aboriginal languages as ruder? Australia ought to learn from New Zealand. Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander vernacular should be defined as official languages of their state, territory, and land. As I said yesterday, New Zealand has 2 official languages, Te Reo Maori, the language Maori, and, surprise, what is this language? Sign language, yeah. So this, by the way, means, what does this mean in Adelaide Sign Language? It's a question. What does this mean? Good. What does this mean? It's a true story. I saw 2 deaf people talking, and the man did like that, and I thought it was like ISIS, it turns out, I asked him, it means sex. It's weird. This is in the Adelaide dialect of the Australian Sign Language. Maybe to fall in love, I don't know, it's good, it's bad. Australia ought to learn to New Zealand also in the case of landscape. Wellington has everything in Te Reo Maori and in English, which is not an official language. Look how beautiful. My students told me that the black stands for the sky. I said, what? It's not Melbourne, but apparently some people in Australia think that black means sky. I think there was a German influence here because this was in Adelaide, of course. This is my own flag. Of course, I don't have the permission from Harold Thomas. So, despite what I told you at the beginning, that I believe that language is much more important than land, I actually realize that many Aboriginal people believe in a Trinity. The Trinity is not Il Padre, Il Figlio e lo Spirito Santo. Not this Trinity, but the Trinity of people, language, people, land, language. That's a Trinity. I think this flag is much better linguistically because it shows you the Aboriginal spirituality that when you talk to a kangaroo in Galinyala, you need to speak in Bangala because the kangaroo would not understand Ghana. Because the kangaroo belongs to the land. The language belongs to the land. And the Aboriginal people, surprise, belong to the land. The land does not belong to the Aboriginal people. The Aboriginal people belong to the land. By the way, I criticize the native title. I think native title is against basic Aboriginal spirituality. Of course, it's a Western tradition that if you can touch it, it belongs. But I think that the Trinity is language belongs to the land just like we belong to the land. The land does not belong to us. This is my flag for Australia. Much better than the current flag, which is, in my view, ridiculous. Anyway, aesthetic motivations. When you lose a language, you lose a culture, intellectual wealth, a work of art. It's like dropping a bomb in a museum, the Louvre. This is Ken Hale, who was a linguist at MIT, a friend of Noam Chomsky. I believe in diversity. I believe in cheeses. I took my friend Ian Henschke for his birthday. I told him, choose 4 cheeses in smelly cheeses. And if I go to Adelaide Central Market and they tell me, excuse me, sir, we only serve cheddar cheese, I would be extremely disappointed because I like my chabichou, I like my gorgonzola, I like my roquefort. Now, you might be lactose malabsorbent. It's a matter of taste. It's a matter of aesthetics. Look how beautiful. 400 different Aboriginal tribes, Aboriginal traditions, Aboriginal dances, Aboriginal song lines. Look how beautiful. Look how ugly. This is ugly for 2 reasons. Firstly, it's monochrome, so most Aussies are monolingual, as you know. The monolingual mindset, as my friend Michael Klein used to call it, the late Michael Klein from Melbourne. Most Aussies are monolingual, which is not a problem, but the problem is the monolingual mindset. So the problem is that if, say, Gizem, who is from Turkey, speaks in, say, Brisbane, there might be some Aussies, I'm not talking about Aboriginal people, who would say, oh wow, she has a foreign accent, that's kind of a disability, except that she knows at least 1 more language, so she has an advantage over them. But you know what I mean. I have a friend who told me that he went to a bar in Australia and there were 2 Chinese people speaking Mandarin, and there were 2 Aussies, Anglo-Aussies, who looked at them and they said, oh, look at these people, they come to our country and they do not even learn our language. My friend is Aboriginal and he was there. And of course, my friend has a lot of chutzpah. He said, wait a second, you came to our country and you didn't learn our language, so I mean, like, why are you criticizing the Chinese? The other thing is that it's ugly because of the boundaries. Look at the boundary between Western Australia and Northern Territory and South Australia. Now, you might say this boundary does not matter. Well, surprise, we saw how it mattered during the pandemic. I actually tried to get from Northern Territory to Western Australia and I was stopped. I couldn't get in because of some lockdown stupidities, and therefore I couldn't go to the Mirrawong that I wanted to visit. I visited the Mirrawong just several days later. I have some Mirrawong friends here as well. Are you aware of the origin of the line between Western Australia and the Northern Territory? Do you know why this line is like that? Do you know the location? Where is the location from? I will give you a hint. It has nothing to do with Aboriginal history. It has 0 link to Aboriginal history. It has to do with a treaty between Spain and Portugal dividing South America between the Spanish and the Portuguese, CF Brazil and Argentina. That's a continuation of that line. It's shocking. This is what we do not want. We do not want Homo sapiens sapiens, the human who knows she knows, to become a barcode. We want diversity. This is what we want. This is what we want. This is what we want. We love animals. The survival of the Tasmanian devil is important. What about the survival of the Palawa languages of Tasmania? Why is it that people give money to animals but they don't give money to Aboriginal languages? I'm not talking about ILA. I'm not talking about BHP. I'm not talking about the Shanti, the Shanti that we saw yesterday. What's the name? Shanti something. Anglo Shanti. I'm not against animals. I love animals. I pay my dues. These are orphan joeys. But I think that we need to care about languages as much as we care about animals. Look how beautiful. Mamikhlapinatapai. A look shared by 2 people, each wishing that the other will offer something that they both desire, but have been unwilling to suggest or offer themselves. Now, I remember having this feeling when I was 15 years old, but I didn't have a word for it. When I studied Yagan, I was so happy to discover this word because it's a concept that I knew, but I did not have the grammatical tools. Now, as a linguist, I can analyze it using highfalutin Latinisms. How do they come up with Mamiklapinatapa, with this double L, Pink Floyd? You know, the Welsh double L is pronounced Mamiklapinatapa. Iklapi is to be at loss at what to do next. Now, in English, there is no way to do it other than this one that I'll just tell you what it is. The girl says, would you like to come up for coffee? And the guy says, I don't drink coffee. So she answers, I haven't got any. So this is the Mamiklapinatapai in English. You know, you do not have a word for it, so you use coffee. Nahur is a totally different thing because I have never thought about it. So it's an endangered concept altogether. It means a camel that will not give milk until her nostrils have been tickled. Now, if you don't know ancient Persian, I wonder whether you would be able to think about it because our imagination is extremely limited. Think about aliens in Hollywood films. By and large, as a generalization, remember, I'm a linguist, aliens look like ugly human beings. How stupid could that be, given 3.2 billion years of DNA evolution, that aliens would look like us? Do you understand the stupidity? This is our limits. Homo sapiens sapiens has many, many limits. When we lose these languages, we lose these limits. Well, we add these limits. Tingo, to take all the objects one desires from the house of a friend one at a time by asking to borrow them until there is nothing left. I would have never thought about this concept altogether, but of course if you study Pascuan, you learn about it. So far, I talked about the ethical reason and the aesthetic reasons. I would like to move to the utilitarian benefits, and this is something very important that I want you to listen to very carefully because you will talk to many governmental officials in the future. Language revival has to do with personal, mental, spiritual, and physical well-being. Look at an email from Jenna. Unsolicited. Nobody asked her to write an email. This is what she wrote after the first Bangala workshop. Personally, I found the experience of learning our language liberating and went home feeling very overwhelmed because we were finally going to learn our own language. It gave me a sense of identity. And I think if the whole family learned our language, then we would all feel totally different about ourselves and each other, because it's almost like it gives you a purpose in life. Facebook comment by Evelyn. A big thank you on behalf of our family here in Port Lincoln. Our ancestors are happy. As you know, when an Aboriginal person says our ancestors are happy, it's a sign of happiness. Something that many non-Aboriginal people might not use. Jews only use the negative way. If your grandfather saw what you did, he would have moved in his grave. But it's Turkish as well? Yeah, but never our ancestors are happy. And as Aboriginal politician Aidan Ridgway, as well as Peter Yu said to us, language is power. Yeah, Peter Yu said language is power, language is politics. Let us have ours. Darcy Hallett, Michael Chandler, and Christopher Lalonde in 2007 wrote an article entitled, surprise, Aboriginal Language, Knowledge, and Youth Suicide. Note, Aboriginal is a word used in Canada. It's not Australian Aboriginal, it's Aboriginal Canadian. When I arrived in Australia, I heard many fallacies. The first fallacy I heard by a very close linguist friend of mine, Australians hate hierarchy. First myth. Second myth, Australians hate authority. That's what he told me, that, within 1 week, it was in Melbourne. Third myth, the word Aboriginal is only in Australia. All these are myths. Absolute myths. Australians, unfortunately, as a generalization, love authority, love hierarchy, and Aboriginal is not only used in Australia, it's used in Taiwan, It's used in Canada. Importantly, what they discovered is that in British Columbia, Canada, there is a clear correlation between youth suicide and lack of conversational knowledge in the native language. Let me tell you what they did. They looked at 6 Aboriginal tribes in British Columbia, Canada, which was, British Columbia, the capital is Vancouver, which is north of Seattle in the United States of America. It's a beautiful spot. There was one tribe that lost its language completely. There was a lot of suicide, youth suicide in that tribe. Another tribe did not lose the language. There was no suicide whatsoever. And then they looked at 4 other tribes, and they saw that the more language loss, the more suicide. So there was a correlation. Causation is extremely hard to prove in science, by the way. If you talk about trillions of dollars for cancer research, they usually only prove correlation, not causation. I would like to argue today that just as language loss increases, unfortunately, suicidal ideation and depression, language gain, language revival, reduces ill mental health and empowers the well-being of the people involved in the revival, and most importantly, also their associates. So what I'm trying to say here, that not only you who is reviving your language will be better mentally, but also your family members and associates who are not part of the revival. And this is what we know as the ripple effect. Why is it so important? Because it is a game changer. If this is true, if I can prove it quantitatively, scientifically, you understand why it is a game changer. I'll explain why it is a game changer. Because language revival today is part of the humanities, the arts. So my professorship is part of the School of Humanities. What I'm arguing here is that my professorship should be part of the Faculty of Health, not the Faculty of Arts. Because Faculty of Arts has no money. As simple as that. Faculty of Health has a lot of money. We saw how many quadrillions of dollars have been spent on a pandemic, which is under health. I'm not going to get to the fact that in Sweden there were fewer dead people than in Norway. Sweden didn't do any lockdowns. But this is not the topic of the lecture today. Quadrillions of dollars. If we manage to put language revival under health, this means that we will have not just an empire here with Sue and the Goldfields Language Center, but we'll have empires like that, and even bigger, all over the place, and not only 25. Because it will become just like a health clinic, you know what I mean? So you go to a clinic, how many clinics you have? Thousands. This is a game changer. Let me give you some examples from Aboriginal Australia. Sivak, Zuckermann, Walsh et al. Demonstrate that the Bangla language is a key element of the Bangla indigenous people's identity, cultural expression, autonomy, spiritual and intellectual sovereignty, and well-being. These are just some examples. I'm not going to go through all of it. Sivak, Zuckermann, Walsh et al. Developed the systematic indigenous language and well-being survey. Watch this space, more to come. Let me give you some examples from Poland. In Lemko, Skrodzka, Hansen, Olko, and Bilewicz found that although the Lemko, severely victimized ethnic minority in Poland language use, is positively related to cognitive availability of trauma, it also limits the effects of such availability on trauma-related symptoms. If you're interested, I can give you more information. Olko confirms that the use of Nahuatl is what we got from the word avocado. Avocado in Nahuatl means testicle. If you look at an avocado, it looks like a testicle, but the Spanish, they heard abogado, oh yeah, it's like a lawyer. Yeah, lawyers have big testicles, I guess. So abogado means lawyer, advocate. And this is why we say avocado in English. Abogado. It's a phonetic matching. We also took xocolatl as chocolate from that language, by the way. Chocolate is from that language. Many other words we took. Nahuatl, which is spoken in Mexico, is beneficial for the community. The effect is significant in communities strongly affected by language loss and assimilation. Again, a quantitative analysis of the correlation between language revival and well-being. Okay, I would like to start concluding because I want to have some time for discussion, complaints, questions, queries, conclusions for the implementation. Tonight we're going to do it as well. So let me start concluding. I mentioned the language revival diamond yesterday in the panel, but many people were already asleep. Were already on their way to Kevin, my friend Kevin. This is a very important diamond because it shows you the necessary conditions for language revival. You must have language owners. The language owners are always at the wheel of the revival. We revivalists, we are just, how should I say, step co-parent. The mother, and forgive me for using mother in the traditional sense, I'm not a wokeist. The mother is the Aboriginal community, the stepfather is the revivalist. Language owners are always at the wheel. Never should you have a laboratorial language revival. It's not a laboratory at the laboratory. It's not like chemistry laboratory. But you must have public sphere, you must have linguistics, and you must have education. You cannot have language revival without all these four elements. Immersion is beautiful. Immersion is something we need to aspire to. That's what happened in Israel in the Ulpan. Ulpan means exactly that place where you immerse into language. So I'm giving you some examples of immersion. Ada beautifully mentioned the MOOC, the Massive Open Online Course that I recommend all of you to take. I would like to end with some Australian signs. And you will understand that the last sign is the most important sign when it comes to our conference. I'll explain soon. These are Australian signs in Sydney. You need to tell me whether the ticket I received on the left was justified. By the way, for me, this is the epitome of modern Australia. It's not a democracy, it's not an aristocracy, it's not a hypocrisy like England, it's a bureaucracy. It is run by bureaucrats. I hope you're all aware of it. Australia is a bureaucracy. But what can we do? We can just swallow the bitter pill. So I paid the fine. That's another sign that I found in South Australia. Do you all understand this sign? Gizem? No. Because you need to be a native Aussie speaker for that. I did not understand it, but then I saw this one. So it means don't drive like a knob, K-N-O-B. So knob is like a... My Chinese student asked me whether this means don't drive like a chicken because chickens go from lane to lane. You know, they kind of... except that this is don't drive like a cock, I guess. But this is not the best sign because the best sign is coming. When I saw this sign, it's a true story. As a linguist, I had to make a very dangerous U-turn to take a photo of the sign because I had no idea what the sign meant. But then somebody, when I made this U-turn, somebody shouted at me, "Don't drive like a wanker." So I realized what it meant. This is South Australia, driven by Chinese, Turkish, Arabs. They don't understand this sign. But this is a sign that I want to end up my presentation with. And this sign corresponds with or maybe it's the other way around, the slogan of this beautiful conference corresponds with this sign. So the sign is stop, revive, survive. As you know, we are at a conference in which you have survive, revive, thrive. This is stop, revive, survive. So this is a summary. If your language is endangered, say you are an Aboriginal person who is not Pidgin-Jara, not Walbri, and the other 10 languages, do not allow it to fall asleep, because it's very hard to reclaim a sleeping beauty. It's not easy. It requires a lot of time, a lot of attention, a lot of dedication. You need to have a heart of gold. Well, I guess I cannot say balls of steel because it's kind of politically incorrect, but you need to have the patience of a crocodile, and you need to know how to serve as a punching bag. Any language revivalist has to know how to serve as a punching bag. It's a must. And of course, you should never look for gratefulness, gratitude, or recognition, or absolutely not. If you do it for that, you should not do it. Because if your language falls asleep, and unfortunately, most of the world languages will fall asleep in the coming decades, stop your life. I mean, there are moments in life where you stop. Sometimes you need a tragedy, you need revive your language, and then you will survive. Otherwise, you will just become one of everybody else. You will just kind of integrate to the black hole, in quotation marks, of the same. Stop, revive, survive. And then if you do that, then you will thrive. So stop, revive, survive, thrive. I should add thrive to this sign. Maybe I should talk to Victorian, this is a Victorian sign. If you revive a language, this is very important. I hinted at it at the beginning of my lecture today. Embrace the hybridity of the children's emerging tongue. It will definitely be a hybrid. I'm telling you in advance. I know it because I've looked at least 100 revivals. None of them was not a hybrid. All of them were hybrids. There is nothing wrong with hybridity. On the contrary, it's new diversity. Now, if your language is healthy, say you are American, Mandarin speaker, Spanish speaker, Arabic speaker, there are some big languages in this world. American, of course, is the leading language today. It might well change, but if your language is healthy, consider helping others in linguistic need. There are so many people, and I'm preaching the converted here, who need your help. And this corresponds with what I said earlier, that I believe that your goal should not only be to reclaim your own language or to revitalize your own language or to reinvigorate your own language. Your goal ought to be to assist other Aboriginal people, Indigenous people, also overseas, not just in Australia, in reconnecting with their cultural autonomy, intellectual sovereignty, spirituality, and well-being. Thank you so much.